would not recover. I screamed and cried out to God in anger and desperation. Why have you not answered our fervent prayers for Ben's earthly healing when you could have? His death will not be in vain. This had better be so big for your kingdom, Lord. What you hold in your hands is just one confirmation to us as parents that my prayer is beginning to be answered, and proof that God often uses great heartbreak and loss to reveal his unfolding purposes and will for our lives. No parent would ever wish this kind of grief and heartbreak on their child. We would turn back time in a second if we could. But we can already see how our loving Heavenly Father is using Mattie's story for good and for his purposes. And we know that Ben's legacy of faith will live on through her words. Our hope is that as you read this book, you too will find healing, comfort, and the renewed hope that Mattie has found, and ultimately, the God of hope himself. Denise and Alan Jackson.
Introduction. Aren't all these notes the senseless writhings of a man who won't accept the fact that there is nothing we can do with suffering except to suffer it? Who still thinks there's some device, if only he could find it, which will make pain not to be pain? C.S. Lewis, A Grief Observed. Grief doesn't come with a handbook. If you've lost someone dear to you, this idea has either offered you freedom from the false expectation that there is a right way to grieve, or it has left you feeling hopeless and without direction, reminding you day after day that you can't fix it, you can't define it, and you sure as hell can't defer it. There are guidelines, of course, clinical scales that help determine phases of denial, anger, acceptance, and a few others. And while a useful tool, serving in some ways as an emotional mile marker, these scales follow anything but a linear order. Grief invokes chaos, shuffling these steps and phases out of line, and often leaving us disoriented and internally off balance. Grief is not a one-way street toward healing. We can't climb a ladder or check off boxes to reach a better day. Everyone's grief and every day of grief looks different. My pain is processed differently than yours, and our stories won't play out the same way. But what is true for most who have experienced grief is that the illusion of control over our lives, the tight, self-preserving grip we thought we had on our person and on our plans, is now gone. What we thought was secure has been snatched away. For some, that may offer relief. After months or years marked by sickness, you're no longer the caretaker for an illness or an injury you couldn't control to begin with. Your loved one is no longer in pain and you're released. For others, this wake-up call to unforeseen suffering breaks our hearts and confirms in life-changing ways that we are no longer and never have been in charge of our own fates. The point is this: we all have different stories, struggles, fears, and feelings. We all stand in different points in faith, if even in faith at all. Some of us are years of tears past the days that wrecked and reset our lives. For some of us, the loss is so fresh, we can't remember what it's like not to feel raw. Today, at age 31, I stand somewhere in between. 3 weeks before our first wedding anniversary, I lost my husband to a sudden traumatic brain injury. Until then, my life had run pretty smoothly. I had a secure, loving family, lifelong friends who'd grown to be more like sisters, a fairly successful career, and a new marriage to a man who loved bigger and harder than I ever dreamed someone could. Up until that point, grief to me meant losing a grandparent or a friend moving to a new city, both of which are absolutely painful, of course, but nothing had ever shattered my reality and my understanding of faith and suffering like losing Ben. It's important to know my story is exactly that, a story. A true story of loss, heartbreak, and grieving a love and a life I'd planned for myself. A true story of a young woman who grew up in faith, but who, in grappling with faith after loss,